Hello there. I don't know, all these moans about the dreadful weather you've been having. I've obviously brought back some Greek sunshine from my travels. You can watch this space for the peeling. Roger Livingston has been in one of Southern's hotspots today when Dorset County councillors met a barrage of protest at the axing of school meals.
When Dorset Council first thought of the plan to cut school meals for the under-12s, all 40,000 of them, more than a few people got a bit hot under the collar. And quite a few of them were outside the council offices today to make sure councillors knew just how they felt. Mums with children and dinner ladies rubbed shoulders with militant socialists to get their message across. The police let things go for a while but thought it prudent to push the crowd back a little. This upset at least one councillor and some local union officials, who thought the action unduly provocative. But in the end, the whole demo went off without serious incident. Well, when the councillors finally got round to going into the chamber to debate the issue, it was extremely restless inside. The gallery had to be called to order on several occasions, and the chairman even threatened to clear the gallery on more than one occasion. And as the first speeches began, it was difficult to see that anyone was actually in favour of cutting school meals altogether. Quite obviously, the Labour group here were against cutting the school meals, and they asked immediately for the issue to be referred back to the committee. And surprisingly, they got some support from the Conservative colleagues. No less a person than the Conservative Mayor of Bournemouth said that even in the dark days of the war, when money was even tighter, they still had a school meal service. Other members referred to the fact that the Secretary of State, Mr. Mark Carlisle, had said that cuts should be in administration and not necessarily in the meal service itself. Another councillor said that by cutting these meals, 600 dinner ladies would be made out of work to add to the 350 that this county has already made redundant. On the other hand, some said that teaching in classes was the first priority and that meals were very far down the priority list, and that in fact that it was the parents' responsibility to feed their children. In the end, it was no surprise. The Conservative move to cut school meals was carried by more than 30 votes.
Shame! Hang down your heads!
Those kids will grow up one day!
Well, I think that when the voting figures are finally announced, you'll see that there are a lot more people who have supported our line than could have been anticipated before the meeting. What I'm really sorry about is that the council haven't seriously looked at other alternatives, and they haven't given us and school meals ladies the opportunity of putting forward other suggestions. They haven't looked at them seriously at all.
One Conservative who voted against his own party was Councillor Norman Day.
I spent my whole life, nearly 40 years in teaching, and I'm disgusted to think that the Education Committee cannot fulfil its real obligation, which is not only to educate, but also to see that the children are well looked after, and this is a retrograde step, and Dorset will go down with a very big black mark in the education system.
Feelings obviously running very high in Dorchester. Well, we're into the silly season now, where you can't get anything done because Mr. Smith's on holiday for the next fortnight. Mr. C. Mitchellmore is also on vacation, so brace yourselves, if you will, for an assortment of day-by-day faces in this chair for the next couple of weeks. Southern News, though, comes first with Steve Harris.
A man was found guilty at Brighton Crown Court today of throwing a brick through a car window, fracturing a girl passenger's skull. Arthur Goldring of College Road at Ardingly was fined £200 plus £260 costs. He was found guilty of malicious wounding and criminal damage, but the jury added that he'd been provoked by the car speeding outside his cottage. Teenagers from 9 NATO countries were gathering at Dover today for the 9th International Youth Camp. Here's Veronica Charwood to tell us what they'll be doing during the next 16 days.
An action-packed holiday of sports, sightseeing and dancing lies ahead for more than 250 young people. They'll learn to live in a community atmosphere at the Duke of York's Royal Military School near Dover. The youth camp is sponsored by the British Army of the Rhine and the Royal Air Force Germany. It's become very popular since the first camp was held in Denmark 9 years ago. And this year's camp at Dover has attracted youngsters from Europe, America, Canada and of course Britain. It's all laughter and fun for them, but the Army sees it as one way of forging the bonds of friendship for the future with the youth of today.
Police have described a man who robbed a woman of £8,000 in St Winifred's Road at Cheriton near Folkestone. She was threatened with a knife while on the way to the bank from the Amico garage at Cheriton on Tuesday. The robbers, described as white, in his mid-20s with dark collar-length hair, 5'11" tall, wearing a jacket and T-shirt. Another man drove the getaway car, a smoke grey Austin Cambridge or Morris Oxford. A stately home in East Kent, Broome Park, is being developed into a massive leisure complex at a cost of £2 million. Exclusive holiday apartments and a sports club will be built into Broome Park, which is located between Denton and Barnham in Kent. Restoration work will be carried out on the stately home's unusual pendant ceiling, the Chinese room with important wooden carvings and a Georgian saloon. £1.5 million has already been spent by the developers Gulf Leisure, a subsidiary of the Gulf Shipping and Oil Companies. The Borough Council at Maidstone have been accused of wasting £80,000 on estate agents' fees to sell council houses. Now the council will employ one person to handle the estate agent work. But Labour councillor Paul Lewis says the person should have been employed 2 years ago instead of wasting money on private estate agents. Firemen cut 5 people free from the wreckage of 2 cars after an accident at Roberts Bridge in East Sussex. They were rushed to hospital in Hastings after the head-on collision on the A21 London Road. A group of businessmen have come up with a plan to save Southend Pier, which is due to close in September. They say it could be developed into a casino, hotel, conference centre and language school. It's hoped the idea will be considered by Southend councillors who want to close the pier as part of spending cuts. An American airline expects to make a compensation claim for a jumbo damaged at Gatwick Airport. Braniff International say the claim could amount to £1 million. A hole was ripped in the jumbo's side at Gatwick by a driver on mobile passenger steps. Planners for Thanet Council have rejected a scheme to build a supermarket in the conservation area of Old Margate. They said it would be out of character with the 18th century area in King Street in Old Margate. 6 Coast Guard cottages overlooking the channel at St Margaret's near Dover are up for sale, and they come complete with their own watchtower, just right for the discerning buyer who wants to keep an eye on the cottage's 2.5 acres of land. The buildings, which are of historical and architectural interest, are being sold by the Department of the Environment. Interested buyers will be relieved to know the job of a Coast Guard doesn't go with the cottages. That's gone to the new Dover Coast Guard Centre 2 miles away. Now cricket, and the Sussex bowler John Spencer is to have a benefit season next year. Spencer, who's 31, joined the club in 1969 and was capped 4 years later. Negotiations will begin to turn Hastings Cricket Ground into a massive shopping precinct costing £50 million. A developer wants to put 11 large stores and a car park on the ground. Last night, Hastings Borough Council agreed to negotiations in principle on part of the land, subject to more negotiations, and the developer promises to find a better site for the cricket club. A woman cleared at Maidstone Crown Court yesterday of murdering her husband was today resting at her parents' home in Essex. In court, Mrs. Joan Francis says she couldn't remember the incident and was found not guilty of murder and manslaughter. It was alleged that she stabbed her husband 4 times during a quarrel at their home in Lydd, not 44 times as we incorrectly reported yesterday. And finally, the Kent Police Band flew off to America today. They'll stay with families at Grand Rapids in Michigan and represent Britain in an international police band festival. Now back to Sarah.
When you lose a loved one, I think most people's initial reaction tends to be a selfish one. I will never see that person again. And when I switched the radio on this morning and heard of Peter Sellers' death, I felt the same. I felt cheated. There'd be no more Inspector Clouseau, no more silly voices to come. Harry Seacombe summed it up by saying there was so much untapped talent. Here's Christopher Peacock with an appreciation of Peter Sellers' work.
Peter Sellers was born of show business parents in Southsea. Such was his mother's preoccupation with getting Peter in on the act that 2 weeks after he was born, she carried him on stage and presented him to the audience. And from that moment, Peter Sellers, in his own words, got away with making people laugh. He was out of the royal tradition of comedians, coming via Enser, The Windmill, and everybody's favourite radio show, The Goons. As the victim Bluebottle, Sellers gained a royal fan in Prince Charles. Arriving at Portsmouth this morning on the Royal Yacht Britannia, the Prince said he was very saddened to learn of the ex-goon's death. Fellow goon Michael Benteen, who lives in Hampshire, said today of his friend, "His death is all the sadder because Peter had the precious gift of being able to make people scream with laughter in a world where there isn't too much left to laugh about." Sellers himself never understood why he was funny. Away from his work, he was a complicated man, sometimes lonely and misunderstood, always searching for happiness through travel and a succession of beautiful wives. but only truly happy when he could hide behind a mask or experiment with a funny voice, which he loved to do in the Panther movies. In a film made by Tony Palmer about the bittersweet life of Peter Sellers, we find him and former Beatle Ringo Starr involved in a piece of typical tomfoolery.
It's not a Chablis, is it?
No, no.
Not Chablis, no. I'm right in assuming that it isn't, of course, Sauterne or Champagne.
No.
No. 7-Up, is it?
No.
Is it water?
No.
Milk, is it milk?
No, it's not milk.
Jam?
No, no.
What is it then?
No. In fact, it is half a Scotch egg.
Good Lord, what year is it?
The timing and delivery that marks true comic genius. That clip was by courtesy of the BBC. Peter Sellers shared his gift for laughter with the world. He gave more than he needed, perhaps because he was haunted by the fear that his heart could give out at any time. But he leaves behind a rich seam of humour in films like Dr. Strangelove, I'm All Right, Jack, and perhaps most memorable of all, the accident-prone Inspector Clouseau. It's all a long way from a travelling show in Southsea where his mother put him on the stage, aged 2 weeks. If it hadn't been for Mum, he once said, I'd probably have ended up a road sweeper. Now that would have been a laugh.
And we're going to miss you, sir. And Chris mentioned Dr. Strangelove. In fact, that's probably one of Sellers' best-known films. You'll be able to see it this evening on Southern at 11 o'clock as a tribute. Right, let's change tack. Proposals to change the county boundaries are guaranteed to ruffle people's feathers, and quite understandably so. Now, there are changes afoot, but don't get ruffled. It's not the county boundaries, it's the parliamentary constituencies within those boundaries. Since 1976, the Boundary Commission has been monitoring the ebb and flow of the population, and they're recommending some changes. Probably these will affect MPs more directly than it'll affect us. Brian Shallcross at Westminster has the details on your behalf.
The Commission's proposals radically alter the political face of Hampshire, and frankly, sitting MPs from both major parties will have considerable headaches as a result of these changes when they come to fight the next election. The Southampton area will now find itself with 3 marginal seats rather than 2. Southampton Itchen, held at present by Labour MP Bob Mitchell, has been a comparatively safe Labour stronghold in recent years, though Mr Mitchell's majority was a mere 1,600 in the last election. Now, under these proposals, with the loss of the Woolston area, Labour stand to lose between 1,000 and even 2,000 votes in that constituency. So, if last year's election had been held using the new boundaries, Bob Mitchell's seat would have fallen to the Conservatives. And those same Labour votes now go to the Eastleigh constituency, held for some years now by Conservative Sir David Price. Not only that, Eastleigh loses solid Tory support at the other end of its area with the loss of Romsey to a totally new constituency. So there's no doubt now that Labour will see Eastleigh as a winnable seat. Southampton Test, always seen as a key marginal which swings the way the government goes, also has some changes, but not radical enough to alter its role. If anything, it seems it could mean a few extra 100 votes going the Conservative way next time. The other major news comes from Basingstoke, held by Conservative Junior Minister David Mitchell. The new Basingstoke constituency would lose much of its safe Conservative area to the newly created seat of North West Hampshire. And as more Londoners set up home there, Basingstoke moves nearer to being a possible marginal seat. Moving south now, there'll be some annoyance in the New Forest that their seat has been split into 2, losing the New Forest name incidentally, but nothing here that could conceivably change the political colour of that area, and that's true in the remaining Hampshire seats, though it had been rumoured here that the Isle of Wight was to be split into 2 constituencies, with part going to the present Christchurch constituency, but the commissioners haven't in fact done that, keeping the island as it is, with one of the largest electorates in England, coming close now to 100,000 or so. Now, it should be stressed that these are the Boundary Commission's first proposals, and after some public objections, changes could in fact be made, but we can take it that this will be the basic pattern for future elections to Parliament in the county of Hampshire.
All change on the political scene. Well, if you're a regular day-by-day watcher, you'll be familiar with the name Chris Smith, who beat 2,800 miles of sea and large bouts of loneliness to cross the finishing line in the recent Transatlantic yacht race. Well, we've heard his radio reports, but what did it look like out there? John Kane with Chris Smith.
Chris, welcome back to our country.
Thank you, John, very much. It's nice to be back.
Pity the weather isn't better, but...
That's right. Well, before we actually start about the race and its trials and tribulations, let's go back to that day, Saturday the 7th of June, and the scene over there in Plymouth Harbour, where this year's entries in the single-handed Observer Transatlantic race jockeyed for position. Chris was sailing the smallest boat in the fleet. Sadler Blue Jacket was just 25 feet long. On board was an 8mm day-by-day camera, and it's his film we show now. To get it, Chris had to sail across over 2,500 miles of unpredictable seas. And as we will hear in a minute, it can be very lonely. It certainly can be very dangerous, and for Chris, it was his second attempt. He had to retire last time after a series of Atlantic gales, and an illness proved all too much for him. Well, before leaving, he had told me that he felt he had to do it. Crossing the Atlantic single-handed was a challenge, something which had to be achieved. And while he did, we on Day by Day anxiously waited for his weekly radio reports. Also on board was a small device which sent a signal to a satellite. From it, we could calculate Sadler Blue Jacket's precise position, something Chris would have found very handy as he struggled to get fixes from a non-existent sun. Time for him turned upside down.
Well, this is dawn on Monday. I guess most of you are still fast asleep in bed. No, wait a minute, it's dawn here. Oh, gosh. I'm getting your time zones confused. Most of you will be at work, of course, because it's 25 to 10. But it's just dawn here because, naturally enough, we're in a different time zone altogether. I'm just having my breakfast coffee, actually. I look as if I've had a night on the tiles. I very often do it this time of day. It's surprising how often things that really happen at sea happen at night. Designed that way, I don't know, but it's frequently the case. But last night was rather peaceful, just for change. Unbelievable though it may seem. Just 24 hours ago, I was in yet another gale. Hove to. I hove to largely because I got so fed up with trying to make any progress to windward in this vessel. I mean, it's fine in a big boat, you can really keep climbing through those waves, but once the waves get to a certain height, the wind to a certain strength, all you can really expect to do is reach, which he does magnificently well. But progress to windward slowed to a halt, really was negligible, so I was so fed up and disgusted with the whole business, I just hove to and went below and had some sleep, which I desperately needed. Things just get too much for you occasionally. And I suppose no one else to talk to. You're pent up. You know, suddenly something trivial, I suppose. It's often just the trivial thing, but it's just be the straw that breaks the cow's back. And either you go around with kicking things or banging things, poor old boat's not her fault. Or you, as I did the other day, for a very good reason actually, you have a good week. The reason was that my wife Dorothy had been on the radio talking, trying to talk to him, and it's no good. Only heard snatches. I knew she was there. It just seemed, you know, it just seemed too much to have to put up with that. Very unfair. Oh. One gets over these things. Gets something a bit short of water. I've missed my early morning porridge, which is rather a shame. It's something which I usually have for breakfast. It sustains one throughout most of the day, but it uses a lot of water, so I haven't really bothered. Had some rather nice little sort of muesli, nutty bars instead. Very nice actually with a cup of coffee in the morning. And plenty of eggs too. The eggs keep remarkably well. So I've been eating pretty well. And in the evenings, of course, I've had these rather nice foil-packed meals, which just require heating up, and then you can eat it straight out the foil packet. It feels so basic. I normally tip it all into a saucepan with some vegetables and heat that up all together as sort of stew, and that's very nice. You've really got to particularly when the weather's adverse, you've really got to keep having hot foods because it's such a morale booster apart from anything else. Well, Independence Day. I'm just in American waters, so I suppose I ought to have Old Glory up at the masthead. It's a very typical day, though. At least it's typical of the last 3 days we had. Very slow sailing in fog. Anyway, it's very much the last lap now. And in many ways I'm not sorry. In other ways, I suppose when one's got to this stage, being at sea nearly 4 weeks now, another few weeks really doesn't make a lot of difference. Although when you know the finish line's only a few hundred miles away, well, I'm raring to get there, I suppose.
At nearly 9:30 our time, while America was still asleep, Chris Smith and Sadler Bluejacket crossed the finishing line. Yes, he'd done it after 2,800 miles of grueling sailing. It had taken him only 30 days. Theoretically, being the smallest boat, he should have been last. But amazingly, he'd beaten half the fleet. Chris, well done. As you crossed the line, what was going through your mind there?
I couldn't quite believe I'd done it. Well, nothing really. I just rather switched off.
The last time, this is the first time, in fact, you've seen the film there. What do you think of it?
Well, it's very nice to see it. I mean, as you know, there's a lot more of it, but anyway, it's very nice to see what you have put on.
Now, presumably the weather wasn't as good as it all seemed?
By no means. No. On the whole, you tend to film when the weather is good, inevitably, because if you go on deck in bad weather, you're going to get spray and so on all over the camera. This is why there's quite a preponderance of rather nice weather on the film.
But nevertheless, with lots of gales and things like that?
Well, no, not lots of gales. I mean, no more than I expected from the North Atlantic in June. No, it was very much the mixture as I expected.
You must have been incredibly pleased with Sadler Bluejacket's performance.
I was absolutely delighted. I felt there was no way I would get there within 32 days. Really, what I was trying to do in the race was beat a time set up in the last race by a chap who was in a very similar sized boat. He got there in 33.5 days, but, I was very lucky. I had very good winds, and I had a super boat.
And where is your trusty boat now?
My trusty boat is just leaving America, in fact, now, on her way home, in the hands of a friend.
Of course, it's all downhill this way, probably. Will it take 30 days?
It's not all downhill. Somebody once said, so it's falling off a cliff. Yes, it should be. It should be fast. I don't know whether it'll actually be faster.
Very quickly, the inevitable question, would you do it again?
Oh, yes, certainly. Yes, I think there's no way that once one has done something like this, even although this isn't the first race of this nature I've done, yes, you get hooked on it. Yes, I'd do it again.
Chris Smith, a brave man, talking to John Kane. It can't have been easy, can it, in the middle of the ocean, talking into a camera. And so it brings us to the weather. Sunshine League tonight, Mr. B?
Yes, Sarah. After the sunshine of the last few days, at least I'm not ashamed to show you a Sunshine League table tonight. You may remember when I last showed you one that Eastbourne was number 1 and Shanklin number 2. Well, they've reversed roles now, and here are the top 9, with Shanklin in top place, followed by Eastbourne 2nd, Bognor 3rd, Hastings 4th, Sandown 5th, Hailing Island 6th, Folkestone 7th, Southsea 8th, and Worthing 9th. Well, those are the top 9. There are 8 more to go. During the past fortnight, we've had an average of about 4 to 5 hours of sunshine a day, which isn't very much, and that's been reinforced, of course, by the last few days. Anyway, here are the others. Deal is number 10, 11 is Brighton, 12 Margate, 13 Swanage, 14 Rye, 15 Weymouth, 16 Poole, and 17 Vetnor. Well, that's the Sunshine League, and there's more sunshine to come tomorrow, and probably on Saturday as well. I'm a bit doubtful about Sunday, but that's a possibly good day as well. High pressure over the English Channel at the moment, moving away northeastwards. Well, it's been pretty gloomy in Ireland today with a warm front moving through, and this cold front will come up to affect western districts during tomorrow, but otherwise the rest of the country won't be affected. So here's the forecast chart for noon tomorrow. In West Scotland and Ireland, it'll be cloudy tomorrow with occasional rain. The rest of the country will have dry and bright weather. Now for our own area, and tonight temperatures will fall to about 10 centigrade. Tomorrow rising to 24 centigrade. It'll be a dry night tonight, a dry day tomorrow with lots of sunshine. And that's the end of the forecast. Just to mention, 100th birthday today, Mrs. Wilton of Park Crescent, Brighton. Congratulations. Back to Sarah.
Thanks, Trevor. If you were wondering what that funny noise was, I think we were having a light going, but all has been rectified. Just a reminder, tomorrow's Day by Day and Scene South East on the air at 5:30. With a bit of luck, we'll be ready in time. Hope you join us tomorrow. See you then.